deeply involved with Mars explorations are all Martians. But today I'm happy to introduce to you two authors of Martian lore, one of which truly wrote The Martian. Now, Andrew Weir wrote with The Martian, as far as I'm concerned, a truly engaging book. I, for one, felt right on Mars, screaming at Andy when his Marsonaut, or aeronaut, if we don't want to mix languages, missed, to me, obvious opportunities to contact Earth, vetting for him to make it home, laughing hard at his sharp, dry wit, crying when all seemed lost. Marc Kaufman, the other Martian speaking with Andrew, interviewing Andrew Weir for us, has written the book which takes us inside the Curiosity mission on Mars for a truly up-close and personal look at it. Marc is fascinated by Mars as it might have harbored life or might still be harboring life. And when you ask Marc, are we alone in the universe? His answer is almost certainly not. With two such dedicated Martians, I believe we are in for a treat, following their conversation about living on Mars. Marc? We have a technical issue. Well, what was it? We shouldn't flip all switches. We should simply wait. That's what we're going to do right now. They're checking again, which is good. Checking twice, right? And we're set. Well, the floor is yours, Marc.
That this should start with a technical issue, since that's what happens so often on The Martian, with The Martian. Just a kind of a show of hands, how many people have read this book? The 3 or 4 of you who have not really should. I mean, it is a superb book, and it I think has already and will continue to kind of bring the issue and the reality of Mars to people in a way that it really needs, and perhaps in some ways hasn't before. I'm delighted here to be speaking to Andy, who has a really surprising and interesting story to tell about how all this happened, and he has a lot of deep knowledge about it all. So I'm going to just very, very briefly recap some of what happens in the book, unless you'd like to do it, Andy.
No, you go right ahead.
Okay. It's the tale of an astronaut who unintentionally gets left behind, thought for dead, but he is a terrific survivor, is a brilliant guy, somewhat like Andy, and who understands how to make things happen. And the thing goes on for a number of years, and tells a remarkable story. And I'll leave it at that because I don't want to be a spoiler for those 3 people who haven't read the book. So if we could start, Andy, how did The Martian come to be? How was it that you came to write it?
Well, I was just imagining how a manned Mars mission would go. So I'm a lifelong space nerd. I've always been a fan of manned and unmanned space flight, NASA, ESA, Soviet system, anybody. And I was just literally just sitting in my living room pondering how could we do a manned Mars mission with the technology we have, and I was working out all the little details. Not to write a story about, just because, I don't know, it's fun to do problem solving. And then I started to think, well, okay, any mission plan needs to account for potential failures and things that can go wrong. What if this breaks? What if this other thing breaks? What if these 2 things break at the same time? You need to have a way to make sure the crew doesn't die. And these increasingly desperate situations that my unfortunate fictional crew would be in started to sound like they'd make a pretty good story. So I made one unfortunate protagonist and subjected him to all of them.
And if you could tell us just a little bit about how it began as on your website and grew from there.
Yeah, it's a weird story how I kind of accidentally backed into becoming a writer. I'd always been interested in being a writer, but I also like eating regular meals and not living under an overpass. So I went into computer programming when it was time to choose a career. And I did that for about 25 years. I only quit just last year to go full-time on the writing. Anyway, so writing was a hobby of mine. I would post, I did webcomics, I did short stories, and I would also do serial fiction. Around the time I started The Martian, I had 3,000 regular readers or so to my website, and The Martian was just one of the things I was working on. I posted it a chapter at a time, probably about one chapter every month or two. I started in 2009 and I finished in 2012. And people like it, and I got email about it, and it was a really cool system too, because people, my readers were scientifically minded people. That means nerds, and that's okay. These are my people, right? And they would point out any technical errors and stuff, and so it really helped with the accuracy of the book. Anyway, when I finished, I figured, okay, I'm done, on to my next thing. But I started to get email from people saying, hey, I love The Martian, but I hate reading it on your crappy website, because my website really is crappy. And is there an e-reader version? So I figured out how to make an e-reader version, and I posted that online, and I said, there you go. And then I got email from other people saying, hey, I hate reading The Martian on your crappy website, and I see that there's an e-reader version, but I'm not very technically savvy. So I don't know how to download an EPUB or a Mobi and put it onto my e-reader. Can you just post it to Amazon? So I figured out how to do that. Amazon takes like 69 or 70% of your cover price, and you get the rest. And they make you charge a minimum of 99 cents. You're not allowed to give it away for free. So which means I was pulling down a cool 30 cents per copy. Yeah. And then I said, all right, everybody, you can read it for free on my website, or you can download the download the EPUB from my website, or you can pay Amazon $1 to put it on your Kindle for you. And more people bought it than downloaded it for free, which shows you the reach that Amazon has into the readership market, and also shows you that people are willing to pay $1 to avoid technical hassles. It started working its way up the bestsellers lists in Amazon. People liked it. They gave it good reviews. It started to show up on You Might Also Like lists. And eventually it worked its way up to the top 10 in sci-fi, and that started it really snowballing, because of course when you're like, oh, I don't know, what do I want? I want something sci-fi. What are the top sellers in sci-fi? So that got the attention of an agent who contacted me and said, like, hey, I'm pretty sure that I could sell your book to a print publisher. And then I said, okay, well, you're my agent now then. And then Random House approached us and said, hey, we want to make a print edition. And I'm like, hey, talk to my agent. And then at the same time, Fox approached us for the movie rights. And I'm like, talk to my agent. And he's like, talk to my talk to my film agent associate. And the print deal and the movie deal were agreed upon 4 days apart. So that was a pretty active week for me.
I should just tell you all, for aspiring authors, this is highly unusual what's happened here.
Talk about it's 100% of time. I assume it's like this for everyone.
And Andy had told me that it's now in 30 chapters, in 30 languages, and has sold a lot of books, and will sell a lot more when the movie comes out in November. Since this is a conference about humans going to Mars, the question that arises is, of course, why not the European or the Titan or the man on the moon? Why the Martian?
Well, Mars is the next obvious location for us to explore. I mean, we've been to the moon, and I would actually like us to go back to the moon. I mean, there's a difference between, the fictional world I created and the real world in which we live, of course. And I think it's much more plausible that we'll go back to the moon before we go to Mars, if nothing else, to use it as a proving ground for the technology that we plan to use to go to Mars. Also, there's the question of finding ways to generate rocket fuel outside of Earth's gravity well, and I'm sure you guys have been talking about that throughout your whole conference. But But yes, Mars is the next exciting new frontier. It's the nearest plausible destination that we haven't yet been to. Now, technically, the nearest, planet to us is Venus, but Venus is hell. Venus is like pretty much literally hell. It's 500 degrees Celsius on the surface, it's 90 atmospheres of pressure, it has as much gravity as Earth, which means to get back off of it, you'd need rockets about as big as the ones that you need to get off of Earth, even bigger to shove through that atmosphere. So it's miserable and just well beyond our current technology to deal with. But Mars is interesting. Mars has problems that we already know how to overcome. We know how to deal with being almost a vacuum. We know how to deal with it being really cold. And it's just captivated. The public consciousness has always been more interested in Mars than any other planet.
As someone who has been in this world for many years as kind of a follower and then now as an author, do you have a kind of a seat of the pants sense of when humans might actually make it to Mars?
I get asked that a lot, and my stock answer is probably around 2050. I know that sounds further away than most people would like to hear, but the technology necessary to get there and the costs of getting there are just very high, and it's a big challenge. I would very much, I hope that I get to live to see that day, and 2050 might turn out to be optimistic. I mean, around the time of the Apollo missions, they were saying, oh, we're going to be in Mars by the late 1980s, So it always just keeps getting pushed off. However, I will say this, although this isn't a question you asked, this is a thing that I always like to say. Space technology will eventually have an explosion of popularity because we will eventually, one way or another, make it cheap enough for commercial use. Now, there are people actively working on that right now, like Virgin Galactic and SpaceX, but whether or not we sink billions of dollars into it, it will eventually happen. And for an example of that, I would talk about a saddle, as in a thing you put on a horse. Saddles nowadays are better in every conceivable way than the saddles that the cowboys wore in the mid-1800s. And it's not because we spent billions of dollars researching saddle technology for the last 150 years. It's because we invented technology for other reasons that happen to be useful for saddles. Like, oh, this new material, oh, this kind of cloth, oh, this is a very rugged way of assembling a flexible object such that no amount of flexing will ruin it. And over time, saddles have gotten just amazingly better. The cowboys of the past would have killed for the saddles we have now. And just in the same way, I think that's probably how space technology is going to advance. There'll be a company will invent some new material for turbine jet engines, and it'll turn out to be just like the perfect spacecraft hull, that sort of thing. So even if we don't desperately work on it and sink every cent we have into it, we will eventually bring the cost down till it's commercial, and then once that happens, people will go out and live on the moon and Mars, because that's what people do.
By the way, Elon Musk has a saddle maker now working with him, and as a way to kind of like get into this. Okay, terrific. One of the many things that I really enjoyed about the book was you have a very fast-paced plot that is fascinating, but then also you have this deep well of knowledge about how space technology works, how the chemistry works, how when things fail you could try to make them come together, and where did that come from? I mean, is that something that you researched, or is that kind of who you are?
No, mostly it came from Google. I did a ton of research for the book. I mean, I have been a space geek my whole life, so I started with a fair amount of basic knowledge. I mean, I watch documentaries, I read articles about it, and so it's my hobby. But I didn't know anyone in aerospace or anything like that when I wrote the book. I do now, but when I wrote the book, no, it was all just me researching online and doing the math. But I really enjoy that. So that was actually more fun than the writing part, which is the perspiration part of the thing.
Okay. Okay. And well, let me just take that a little bit further, because an awful lot of what you describe seems like it involves a deep knowledge of the chemistry of various technologies. Did you have people that you would bounce these ideas off of? You know, like, could this work? Could that work? Or was that basically your readers who were telling you whether or not you were off base?
Both. My father's a physicist, and so I would bounce things off of him. I'm pretty strong in physics myself, but not as strong as my dad is. And my dad worked at a national lab, and he would bounce things off his colleagues at my request. But for the most part, it was the readers, or just me doing research on my own, and the readers fact-checking me. It was, I called them beta readers. It's kind of like how it worked out. They would find the flaws, and there were places where I was just flat wrong on how physics or chemistry works. I'm particularly weak in chemistry, so it was nice to have some chemists among my readers say, like, no, this is how that reaction would go.
Okay. When you created the character Mark Watney, who is the protagonist, the guy stuck on Mars, what were you reaching for? I mean, was this an everyman? Was this an exceptional person? Were you trying to lay out what a human being could do in this kind of environment?
Yeah, I wanted him to, it was a fine line. I wanted him to feel like an everyman. I wanted him to be just like, oh, this is a guy that's just like, you could have a beer with him and have, and you wouldn't feel like you're out of your league or anything. But at the same time, he was selected for a manned Mars mission, so he's got to be pretty good at what he does. So he has this very casual and like jovial attitude, but at the same time is incredibly competent. That's what I was going for. The main thing I had to do for him, and I'm totally comfortable with it, was I made him a complete smartass. And that's, there's a few reasons for that. First off, it's my own personality is pretty much like that. And so it makes it easier to write. And second off, there was so much exposition and science in the book that I was afraid it was going to read like a Wikipedia article if I didn't make it interesting. And so having Mark tell it in a kind of smart-ass way and tell a lot of jokes while he's doing it, that got the information across to the reader, hopefully without being boring.
Could you see yourself as a Mark Watney? I mean, could you behave like that on Mars?
No, Mark is... yeah, I mean, I will admit his personality is partially based on mine, but he has like all of my good points, and he has them magnified, and then none of my flaws. But realistically, I don't think I could handle the stress of that situation. I'd probably just break down. I'm not a brave person. I just write about them.
Very good. Okay. What do you think the enormous response to your book tell us about interest in Mars out there, not only here in the US, but in all the other countries, including Macedonia, where you had told me where they have an edition.
Yeah, it's a Macedonian edition.
So this has been a kind of a global phenomenon. What does it tell you about what people think about Mars and what they aspire to?
Well, I think people have always been interested in Mars and have always been interested in space flight. And we haven't had much interesting stuff happen. From the public point of view, actually, when you're a space dork like me, all the stuff we're doing is interesting. I mean, especially private industry starting to get involved, and the experiments they do on International Space Station. I mean, it's all exciting. But from the public's point of view, it's like, well, we went to the moon about 45 years ago, and other than that, we've just been doing kind of low Earth orbit stuff. And so the kind of increased interest in Mars is because people are like, okay, it's been a while since we did anything new. Let's start talking about Mars. And so I think the public interest is really increasing. Okay.
And do you feel that Mars could, should, will be colonized?
Well, could, should, would. Yeah, I would say yes to all three. One of my big things is I like the idea of having humanity somewhere other than Earth. By that, I don't mean get rid of the ones on Earth. I mean, we should have a backup. Because to quote Arthur C. Clarke, Earth is too delicate a basket to hold all of humanity's eggs in. Or I probably misquoted him, but something along those lines. I would like to have a self-sufficient colony of humans and other species, like somewhere other than Earth. Now, it might be easier to do that on the moon, but Mars is also pretty good, especially in terms of resources like water and CO2. But don't take this to me. A lot of people have this attitude of saying, like, Earth is doomed, we've ruined our environment, our only hope is to go to another planet. I don't buy into that. I think we can make Earth a perfectly wonderful place to live. I just want, I'm a 25-year veteran software engineer, and I think it's important to back things up. So.
Fair enough, fair enough. NASA obviously plays a huge role in the book, and it's a very nuanced, kind of complex role where there are some people who are wonderful and glorious and brave, and there are some people who are perhaps not quite so much. And be interested in your thinking about the agency as you were writing the book. How did you see it as the the cause of all that happened?
Well, first off, I have a huge respect for NASA. I'm a big fan, obviously. I portrayed that. I wasn't trying to portray people in there as good or bad, or protagonists or antagonists. I was just trying to say, realistically, what would the people in various positions do? And everybody did what they were supposed to do. People often point to Teddy Sanders, my fictional director of NASA, and they point to him as seeing him as sort of obstructive or an antagonist. But I wasn't trying to portray that at all. He's doing his job. His job is, there's a point at which, I don't want to give spoilers for the 3 people in the audience who haven't read the book yet, but there's a point at which they need to make a decision, and they have to decide between having a very high chance that Watney will die, or a smaller chance that all 6 of their astronauts will die. So they have to decide between one guy probably dying, and the other 5 definitely coming home safe, or risking the lives of all 6. And Teddy says, no, we're not gonna risk 5 lives to try to save 1. And a lot of people read that and perceive it as being like, oh, obstructive or cowardly or bad in some way. But I disagree. I think that from his point of view as an administrator, is the correct call. You say, like, we want to minimize the loss of life in this already disastrous mission. And so I just wanted to kind of like go to bat for Teddy. He's not an antagonist.
Right. I understand and agree with you that there was and actually it was a very satisfying part of the book that everyone was kind of doing what they were supposed to do, or in some cases going beyond that, and really taking the leap. Be interested in your role, if any, in the movie, which comes out in November and has the potential, whoever knows, to really bring an enormous amount of attention to Mars in a way that it hasn't in fiction in a long, long time. So.
Yes, I think hopefully. I mean, remember, I didn't write this book to attempt to spur interest in manned spaceflight or stuff like that. I wrote it as all of my stories are just solely for the purpose of entertainment. I'm never trying to push a political agenda or make a point. I'm just like, I want you to read this and think that was cool, and then you put the book down and move on to your next book. As for my part in the movie, my job primarily was to cash the check, and I did that. I did that admirably well, I think. And but yeah, they didn't have to do anything. Like I have no say over. I have no say or authority in any way. They chose to include me in a few ways, which was just them utilizing resources in the way they thought was best, and also just them being cool. And they sent me the screenplay for my feedback. They made some changes based on my feedback. I talked back and forth a lot with Drew Goddard, who wrote the adaptation. I'm not really allowed to talk about the script too much, but I can say that I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I think the movie's going to be great. I think it will spur interest in Mars exploration, partially because we haven't had that many movies that portray space travel very accurately lately. Now, there have been attempts recently with Interstellar was like kind of 50-50. Interstellar was like, half hard science fiction, and then the other half is like really esoteric. Gravity was pretty cool. It had a few errors that Neil deGrasse Tyson can tell you all about, but they were less blatant, less bold. It's not like they had warp drives, right? And a lot of the movies related to Mars have had some like almost fantasy elements or things that are completely unrealistic. And weren't attempting to be realistic. They weren't trying to portray a realistic, trip to Mars. They're like, oh, we're going to Mars and we're going to meet some aliens there, or oh, we're going to Mars and we accidentally brought along a killer military robot, and one thing led to another. Also, you can breathe the atmosphere there, and it just goes on. But this I think would hopefully drive up interest in manned spaceflight.
Okay, and one of the things that I think it would be accurate to say the book does not get into is kind of some of the science of the search for life on Mars, which always strikes me as being among the great engines to ultimately send humans to Mars. I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I mean, was that a conscious decision you made, or it just wasn't on your radar?
Well, part of the mission, part of the Ares 3 mission, the fictional mission in the book, was that they were looking for life. I mean, they were going around sampling and doing all these things to find life. However, in the book, this isn't that much of a spoiler. They don't, and it's not a priority. The main priority is for Marc to live. I don't want to be a naysayer or anything, but I say nay. I'm guessing. I suspect that there is no life on Mars. Because if you look at life on Earth, it is extraordinarily tenacious and omnipresent. Like, you would be hard-pressed to find, like, anywhere on Earth that doesn't have at least evidence of life. Like, even if you go to, like, Antarctica and, like, dig 40 meters down and then, like, scrape out, like, some ice, you'll see frozen fossilized cells in that ice. If you go to the Sahara, you'll see stuff, like, in the air. It's like life is incredibly good at just occupying the entire planet. So the number of probes we've sent to Mars that have tried to find any evidence of life and not found anything leads me to believe that there is none to be found. Now, fossilized evidence might exist, and Mars might have had life a long time ago. And what would the barrage of meteorites going back and forth between Earth and Mars? It's possible that Earth infected Mars, which makes it much more likely to have life. And I would find that very interesting, especially if they could bring things back to life. Like, for instance, they have successfully planted seeds that they dug out of the Antarctic tundra that were there for 60 million years, and they planted them, and plants grew. So you never really know when something is truly extinct.
Just something that I had picked up along the years of talking about Mars is that apparently the logic of life from Earth landing on Mars is a lot less likely than the other way around. And
Yeah.
what I like to point out is with the panspermia notion, Mark Watney would not be the first Martian. We would all be Martians.
We would all be invaders from Mars.
Exactly. In terms of your kind of your fond hopes of what the book and the movie will do, you said that you wrote it as entertainment, but it was entertainment with a backdrop that was so rich and so interesting and so Martian. So what is your best case hope of what will happen?
I don't know. I guess the best case scenario, well, really, for me, my goal is I want people to be entertained. I want people to enjoy a story and think that it was cool. That's really my overall goal. If it increases interest in science fiction, that would be great. I would love it if it increased interest in Mars exploration, and maybe if there's enough public interest in it, the various nations might allocate a little bit more money to it. That'd be great. But they have other important things to deal with their national budgets too. So.
Okay, and a last question for you. Is NASA involved in the movie? I mean, I know that you're not involved per se, but from what you've been told, are they playing a role in terms of vetting or allowing or disallowing certain things?
Yes, they were. Well, first off, they were consulted extensively by the production. They welcomed the actors and the consultants to NASA and showed them around and answered all their questions. NASA's been very active in supporting the film in any way they can. They're a government agency. They can't support a private product, but they can. They're very cooperative and helpful. The other thing is, most people don't know this. Unlike other federal agencies, NASA's logo is copyrighted. You cannot use NASA's logo just like, I could put the FBI logo anywhere I want. I could make merchandise with the FBI logo on it because it's a federal government agency, but that's not the case with NASA's logo. So you need their permission. And it's interesting because movies that take place in space and have space flight and stuff like that in them often want to use the NASA logo, and it's a slow process to get them to agree to it. But once they read the screenplay to The Martian, they immediately gave permission. So that was pretty cool.
And what was it that you think that they liked about it?
Well, I think it hits squarely on a lot of their goals. First off, it portrays the agency in a very positive light, so I'm sure they're happy about that. Second off, I think they see it and say, like, this could drum up more interest in manned spaceflight. I think it's just win-win-win-win-win for them. So yeah, I think they have no problems with any part of it.
Very good. Well, are there any questions from the audience that I could relay to Andy? I don't know if you heard that.
I did not.
Are you planning a sequel, The Martian Redux? You know, where Mark Watney goes back to Mars.
The Martians.
Oh, what a bad idea.
Or the Venusian. No, I don't have a sequel in mind. I would love to come up with an idea for a sequel because it's fun writing Watney, but I just don't have any plausible scenarios. Like, you know, what do I do? Put him on another space mission and go like, oh, can you believe this guy's luck? Wouldn't you know it? Send him on another mission. Oh, there we go. And then other ideas included him being on the ground, and there's some other mission in peril, and he's one of the ground controllers now. But people like him being in trouble, not him helping someone out remotely. And one idea was the trip back from Mars to Earth is not covered, and their ship is like well past its service date, and they could have problems. But that would just kind of seem really derivative. It'd just be more of the same. And instead of being stranded somewhere awesome like Mars, he'd be kind of on his way home on a spaceship. I don't know. I haven't been able to come up with any good sequel ideas.
For those 4 people, I'm sorry, the spoiler alert should have been provided in terms of. And a final thought that
for you 4 people, I hope you don't find the prolonged sex scene with the Martian Queen too graphic. It felt like it was important to the plot.
Yeah, that was my favorite part.
Okay.
And by the way, I had asked Jim Green earlier about the role of NASA in the movie, and they are indeed embracing it in the way that they can. But he also said that ESA, the European Space Agency, has been on location with some of the filming over in Europe.
Oh,
so
well, that makes sense because they did. They filmed it in Budapest and Wadi Rum, Jordan, and they're done filming now. It's in post-production. Yeah, and as you said, it comes out November 25th, which is the day before Thanksgiving.
Just a coincidence. So, okay, well, I thank you very much, and a pleasure to talk to you, and I really look forward to the movie. It should be very cool.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, that was fun. At least I liked the book and I liked his way of answering your questions, Mark. It's lunchtime, which is good, I think, but we being as we are, we even have some entertainment for you during lunchtime. Before I forget, there are still some tickets for the lunch tomorrow. If you want them, you should buy them today, and the same holds for the reception tomorrow evening at the SunTrust building. And the luncheon is at the City View room, which is quite near walking distance. Now, in the intermezzo, one might say, while we are having dinner, while you will file out, I suppose, we'll see a short snippet, not all of it. It's the fall movie. Good, because you're in for a treat. I've already seen a preview about 6 weeks back. It's a movie that won an award. It's very low budget. They had a $5,000 filmmaker grant created, Lockheed Martin, together with the New Mexico Film Foundation. And the idea was to about a first human born on another planet, and it's like I said, it's a special movie. I really thought it was well made, and it won its prize. It was vetted actually also by an astronaut to see whether it made any sense what they were portraying. And they were. So I would invite you to see this movie, and it's called Delivery from Earth. And it gives a very interesting view of us humans here on Earth, vis-a-vis someone somewhere else in the universe.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
All right, lift off and the clock has started.
Roger, 0J, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around.
Welcome home, Columbia. Beautiful, beautiful. Discovery, go and throttle up.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
It's starting.
Okay, I'm coming.
In the history of space exploration, certain events have captured the imagination and hopes of the world. The Apollo 11 moon landing, the International Space Station, manned missions to the asteroid belt and Mars. But today's event could eclipse them all. For the first time in history, a human being will be born on another planet.
Che?
Capacitor, dila itchon, sa shanado ta.
But they're gonna show the baby. I wanna see the Martian.
Martian, ati tsai, anil tsko hinilt nakasaba kage yadil kil kunat nikilit
Why can't we just get a new TV?
see you, Mr. Tabaha.
Yate Ryan.
Oh, Yate. Something I can help you find?
Well, I'm not buying today. I'm selling.
Isn't this your favorite book, Professor?
It has just been confirmed that mother and baby are doing fine. We should be getting our first glimpse very soon.
Hey, Professor. Would you like a lift?
Oh, yeah, there. Atit, sae. Sanden, schlecht.
I'm coming, Grandpa. A soft screen. I had it,
Ako tilu yahanan lied natal ol kill.
Grandpa, come on.
The link has been established. We should have a visual any moment.
Everyone here is so grateful for the outpouring of love and support that we've received from everyone on Earth. Though we are millions of miles apart, I feel like you're all right here with us, in this room. I'd especially like to thank everyone from my hometown of Gallup, New Mexico, for all the encouragement you've shown me over the years. And even though Shiloh was born in this faraway land, he's no different than the rest of us. As a good friend of mine used to say, Aneheketa nasabakake yadahle kone nehetleta. We are all one child, spinning through Mother Sky.
While you're out there grabbing lunch, grab the opportunity and get one of Marc Kaufman's book, Mars Up Close, and is very interesting and has beautiful pictures. I really can recommend it.